Hello, everybody. This is Han Feizi. And we're doing our first inaugural podcast with Mozi. Mozi and I worked together for many years in the finance industry in Hong Kong. Mozi is very well traveled, and he has many thoughts on China and the world. So now I'll pass it off to Mozi.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, very good to have this opportunity to discuss with Han Feizi. So I read an article from Han Feizi from some months ago on the China's consumption. I found there's many interesting points that he raised about China's consumption maybe being underestimated or underreported. Myself as phases mentioned. I used to work with Phases for about 5, 6 years, but I've known him more than 10 years since 2011. We work in the active research, and then afterwards we stay in touch. Especially yeah, talk a lot about China's development. Um, and consumption is a big topic, given the size of the China's consumption or the mix of the consumption in China's GDP. Um, Maybe phases. If you could, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about your point in that Asian Time article about China's consumption.
Yeah, sure. So it's basically trying to do a an analysis of why things have not kind of worked out as a lot of the Western media has been constantly saying about China. Starting with we're not going to mention Michael Pettis' name because he's not here to defend himself, but the idea that China invests too much and consumes too little. This discussion has been going on for almost 2 decades now, maybe even more. And China just seems to keep chugging along. GDP growth has never really collapsed down to the 2 or 3% that people have been predicting. I figured that somebody had to do a postmortem on why this is so. And then when you actually go down and start analyzing China's GDP and the components, you find that consumption is vastly, vastly understated. What they report is 38% of their GDP is consumption. That 38%, that's household consumption, that comes out to be 6.9 trillion US dollars. No, 6.8 trillion US dollars. When you look at China's retail sales, however, that comes out to be 6.9 trillion US dollars. So retail sales is actually higher than household consumption. You start scratching your head. If you look at the US, retail sales is 6.8 trillion, so a little bit less than China, but its household consumption is like 15 to 17 trillion. And that's understandable because most of household consumption is rent, healthcare, housing, insurance, all that stuff that's not retail sales. So something is going on in China. I'm not sure what is not being reported, but something is definitely not being captured. Especially then if you expand the analysis to look at the actual sales of things in China. Um, the sales of cars is 70% more than the US. Sales of phones is 3 times the US sales of phones. Electronics, luxury goods, furniture, all of that stuff, China is the largest consumer in the world and multiple times that of the US. And it seems like you would expect that China's household consumption would be multiple times the US, but it just turns out to be just a little bit more. So something is definitely being underreported. And what I suspect it is that from the very beginning, from 30 years ago, when China got onto the UN SNA system of national accounts, it got onto the system having lowballed its GDP largely to remain as a developing country for as long as possible for WT negotiations, and then that has just rolled on up to today. And when you go back into the numbers and you look at like per capita GDP in China in the year 1997 was half of Cameroon's per capita GDP. I was in Cameroon in 1997. And let me tell you, I was in Cameroon and I traveled to China in that same year. I can guarantee you that Cameroon in Africa per capita was not twice as rich as China circa 1997. So there's a lot of discretion in how GDP is reported, and that has thrown off analysis in the mainstream media by Western analysts, and I think that's leading to a lot of poor China analysis. Yeah, so I'll stop there and pass it on to Moses.
Okay, so I mean, we can you raise about the camera points about then that would be about if China's GDP is understated, but let's focus on the mix. Yeah, so today we are talking about if China's consumption is underestimated. So just to give the listeners a bit more context, right? So you're talking about two methods of accounting GDP. So I mean, one is by maybe retail manufacturing, another one is consumption investment. Can you introduce these two methods just so that we know? So what are the mix in there and how we should read the retail sales in one method and then the consumption in other method? To connect to your point about the consumption should be more than the retail sales.
Yeah, so one method, the expenditure method of GDP accounting, GDP is equal to CIGY. C is consumption, I is investment, G is government expenditure, and Y is export minus import, your trade balance. So right now, we're just focusing on that C part, the household consumption part. The household consumption part is, in my head, split between retail sales and non-retail sales, and those added together equals household consumption. Retail sales is it's categorized differently in different places, but just basically what normal households buy in a store. And it also includes restaurants. So some of the services is inside retail sales. So in a economy like any other economy you check, like the US, the retail sales is a fraction of total household consumption. It's a fraction of that C. In China, that retail sales is the entirety of that C, or even a little bit more. So something is going on there where that C is only capturing something that's only equivalent to the retail sales part of China's consumption.
Okay, then good. So let's pause a little bit here. Then another method is the service manufacturing agriculture. So do I remember it right?
Yeah, so that's a production. There's expenditure method, and then there's the production method. The production method will have your primary, secondary, tertiary production. The primary would, I guess, be agriculture and mining. Secondary will be your industrial, and tertiary will be your services.
Okay,
and those two sides are supposed to equal each other.
Yeah.
Right. The expenditure and the production method.
Got it. So the retail sales is not from the so-called the production method. So retail sales is supposed to be a fraction of the consumption.
Correct. Yes.
Sorry. And then then it doesn't make sense. Retail sales is the bulk of thing, right? But when I look at the China's consumption breakdown, they have this breakdown from the National Bureau of Statistics. So they provide the breakdowns where consumption also broken down to multiple area like education, housing, that kind of stuff, right? So do they actually, your point about like retail sales being too big a portion of the consumption, could it be that a lot of what we consider to be non-retail sales being counted in the consumption?
Well, I'm not too sure what you're talking about, what you're referring to, but that C is supposed to be made up of retail sales plus non-retail sales, right? So if retail sales already makes up 100% of the C, then the non-retail sales, where is it, right?
Right. Okay. So I was get into some of the figures I dug up over the weekend. So they have these figures in the NPS website. So they broken down the consumption, so what they call the per capita consumption expenditure of household. They also further broken down these figures further broken down into rural and urban.
Yes.
But
Yes.
in any
Yes.
case,
Yeah. Yeah.
they have the category of like food, tobacco,
Yeah. Yeah.
but those are per
Yeah.
capita figures, clothing,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
housing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
transport, communication, education. So they do count the housing, transport
Correct. Correct.
into the consumption though.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I
They
don't
do.
know if they also, but they did not. Yeah, in here, so I haven't really found their retail sales figure. It
Yeah.
doesn't
So
seem like they have a
retail
separate retail
sales,
sales.
yeah, retail sales is not in this in that category. It's not categorized uh, in that per capita chart that the NBS publishes every, I think, quarter.
Mm.
So what happens is that that chart, as a percentage basis, I think is more or less correct. Like the percent that goes into housing, the percent that goes into transportation, the percent that goes into food, uh, on a per capita basis is correct. But when you blow that per capita nationally, it comes out to be too small a number. As in, if you look at China's total car sales, phone sales, just everything you could possibly count as consumption, it's multiple times that of the US, right? But the
Mm.
actual reported retail sales of those items is equivalent to the US. So somewhere, this is not being, the totality of China's consumption is not being captured.
Okay, you are looking at it from another angle, right? So about
Correct.
the quantity of car sales
Yep.
and many other items that like protein consumptions previously you told me.
Yep.
So those figures in China is actually so much bigger than the in the US, but that's quantity, but not monetary value, right? But then of
It
course, yeah.
it's also monetary value in a sense as well. I will quote some numbers. This is done by a Brazilian economist. It's the last time that China did its ICP. It's where they put everything onto purchasing power parity. They recalibrated purchasing power parity every 4 to 5 years. So I'll read a few items. And this compares China and Mexico. China and Mexico have pretty much exact same purchasing power parity GDP per capita in the last time they did it, which is $22,000 per capita. But how they accounted for it, China and Mexico both consume almost exactly the same number of calories per capita, but the food in China on the PPP dollars is 812 versus Mexico, they got 2,223. For motor vehicle sales, China has purchased on a per capita basis more than twice the number of cars as Mexico. But on the purchasing power parity dollars, it's exact same, almost exact same, 226 with 213. On housing per capita, China is 50% more than Mexico. This is housing space per meter square. But it reports 2,396 2,386 for China and 2,930 for Mexico. On per capita electricity generation, China is more than twice Mexico, but on the dollar basis is 515 versus 470. College students per thousand is exactly the same as Mexico, 31.4, but it gives China's value for education expenditure per person 1,260, and it gives Mexico 5,000. So when you go through all these items, either Mexico is overreporting or China's underreporting.
So yeah, your point here is on the per capita basis.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense. All those per capita expenditure in China is a comparable, like even less than Mexico, right?
Yeah.
And then, but you point out, you bring up another angles about this PP, so the price parity point, right? So PPI, right? The point. So that but then the price parity angles, China and Mexico should be quite on par, right? So the same dollar buying a similar thing, right? In China and Mexico, don't you think? So both
Well,
developing
I don't really
countries.
know. Yeah, it could be the price of the items are similar
Okay.
in between China and Mexico. It's just that the per capita consumption that they
Yeah.
give to a Chinese
Mhm.
person, they're saying China and Mexico are pretty much the same GDP per capita, which is 22,000 per person. But then you look at what every person actually buys in China, it's significantly more than on a quantity basis than a person in Mexico. But they assign
Okay.
a lower value for what China buys, for what a Chinese person buys. And I think this has
Okay.
a lot to do with just a discretion that these countries have when they report their GDP numbers.
Okay. I just want to align our points here because my question is so I mean your main point is that China's consumption is less is too small comparing to the retail sales. So my question is so one is I see in the MBS data that actually they include a lot of non-retail sales item in the consumption. So I don't know
Yep.
how they categorize the retail sales. So I
Yeah.
just wonder that when they create a retail sales figure, I don't know if they have includes a lot of education, so
Oh, we
the
know what's
conventional
in. Yeah.
accounting system, not in
Yeah.
retail sales, they count it into retail sales.
We know
So
what's in retail sales. Retail sales is
mm,
reported monthly, so it's basically what you think retail sales is. It's the biggest services component of that is catering, which is restaurants. The biggest
mm,
component of that is car sales, and then there's your furniture, your electronics, cigarettes and alcohol, cultural events, stuff like that. So retail
right.
sales is quite what you would think retail sales is supposed to be.
Oh, okay. So even before your Mexico point, so basically the per capita consumption breakdown already have kind of doesn't add up right with the retail sales. So the retail
Correct.
sales doesn't
Yeah.
include a lot. I mean, big chunk is a restaurant. Then of course, then it make me wonder where the like the education and then the housing those things will being put to, right? Because then the retail sell big chunks of restaurant consumption and then become big chunk of the consumption figure itself. So, but in the consumption breakdown, they have a lot of non-restaurant
Yes. Yeah.
expenditure
I
items.
mean, in
So
the
where
consumption,
those are figured? Yeah.
yeah, in the consumption item, this is what I think. In the consumption
Mm.
item, when they report per capita consumption, they give you a pie chart, and that pie chart is more or less correct, as in a person's percentage spend is pretty much accounted for that pie chart. But
But it doesn't
the
match the retail sales and the consumption ratio.
correct. So what happens is they just lowballed every single item in that pie chart.
Mm.
So that's the only conclusion I can come to is that they have lowballed every single item in that pie chart
Yeah.
because
I mean,
I
for this, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I can reconcile retail sales to data from car companies and phone companies and all the verticals of consumer products. I can reconcile those two numbers. I cannot reconcile the per capita household consumption that's reported on a quarterly basis. When you multiply that out by 1.4 billion people, I cannot reconcile that number to all the stuff that China actually buys, like cars, phones, electronics, furniture, luxury goods. So something I think is just the consumption. When China entered the UNSA system, the early 90s, when they put everything onto the World Bank system, and there are reports on this. They would have knocked down, drawn out, beat up arguments with the World Bank, where the China side walked out of meetings because the World Bank was insisting on a high number for a lot of things, and China said, no, we're not going with that high number. So the World Bank has been, over the years, trying to twist China's arm into accepting higher services in its GDP. And China has been pushing back. And here we are. And now we're at a point where China's economy looks like an outlier, where where household consumption is only 38% of GDP. And I think that's just an artifact of political negotiations 30 or 40 years ago that has lasted until now and has thrown off many people's analysis of China's economy.
No, well, so the premises of your point is now is you had to you depending on the retail basis. Hi, Faces.
Yeah, I'm back. Are you back?
Okay, yeah. So the point that you're making is you're assuming that the retail sales correct, so that the consumption figures or even the breakdowns are all understated. So
Correct.
then of course you have another point about those consumption figures, just individual. I mean, for each one of them in the absolute terms, it cannot be just comparable to Mexico. It should be higher. But let's back to the point about if the retail sales could the retail sales itself be overstated?
No, I reconciled a few items in retail sales, not all of them, a few items that I can track, like car sales and retail sales. You divide the car sales by the average price of cars in China, you get that amount that's reported by retail sales. So
they have those breakdown, and then you validate
those.
it.
So the retail sales, I spot check like a handful of items, and they reconcile with the ultimate market sales of those items.
Okay, then how big is the car sales? Or every item that you check from all the breakdown in the retail sales, you finally mix
I checked car sales, I checked fuel sales because they have a fuel item, and I checked phone sales or electronics, and they all reconcile. Car sales is, the average price of a car in China right now is about $26,000, and they sell 25 million. It's matching up.
Right, but how big a portion are those items that they provide the details, like the quantity?
What do you mean, how big are the items? The retail sales.
What's a mix of a car? Like if the breakdown item they provide to you is only a small portion, then
no, car's big, because they actually report a retail sales number growth with cars and without cars, because the car sales would skew the entire retail sales.
What percentage is it now? So the car sales.
I can check. I can check, but it's but it's significant. If I can bring it up right now, I will.
But okay, back to it's still about this mix. If the consumption as a mix makes sense. So another angle I'm thinking, I thought that I should ask you is, I mean, do such a consumption mix, of course, then you are not involved. Because we're talking about, I'm looking at this, the CIGY, right? Y is very insignificant now. So G maybe still around like 15-20%, I presume.
G is 15. It doesn't quite move. G is like about 15.
Yeah, the government's consumption, basically, the government expenditure.
Yeah.
I could also include some household item, right? So the household expenditure could be both in C and I, right?
I don't really think so. Most of the household items should be in C. A housing, when you build a house, it's an I. It definitely is an I. But when you're living in the house, what you're supposed to do, which I don't think China does, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have what's called imputed rent. That imputed rent every year will be in your C. But when you're
Okay,
building,
rent industry. Okay.
yeah, but when you're building the house, then that's in your
Oh,
I. That's an investment.
yeah, building the house is unusual in China, but what about the people who keep buying apartment, like the second and third and all those?
That's should not be in C. Is that should all be kind of in I.
So yeah, so my point is I also have some household content in it. So the
Yeah,
household,
yeah, but it's not
yeah,
household consumption. It's just investment. Investment could
investment, yeah,
be done by households. It can be done by corporates. It can be done
yeah.
by governments, right? So I don't care if households are doing it. It's investment is investment.
Right. Okay. Then that's my another angle to it is because the per capita consumption is 30,000 for urban household.
Yeah, so that's one of
Yeah,
those
per
things that
capita.
I think is way too
But
low.
but
When they
one
report, continue.
right. But just do the number, right? So 30,000 per capita in the household. But the urban household usually is a three-person in the household, right?
Yeah. 3 point something probably.
Three point something.
Yeah,
But then
that's my guess.
maybe only two, maybe only two that earning a salary. So
Correct. Yeah,
the
yeah.
China's per capita GDP is now is we are talking about RMB, right? This 30K. So and then the income should be somewhere around what 100K for urban,
Something like that. Yeah.
100K. So they are assuming about nearly 70% is being saved or in the I, and then
Well,
30K.
so yeah, I'm not sure we can get a reconciliation like that, but basically over the China's entire economy, I is supposed to be about 42%.
Yeah, but that may make sense, right? Don't you think? So given that the Chinese they really tend to um, put their investment, save and invest. So I think it makes sense is that they save and invest a big chunk of their income. So
Well, I
if
mean that's what people say. What's really, if you on the ground, is a lot of the savings in China are from very wealthy people. So the 老百姓, a lot of them have much lower savings rate than people think. It's definitely not 40-some%. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. Most of the savings in China, I bet, are from the upper tier income earners and the corporates, and a lot of savings is not in households. So I just pulled up the numbers on a monthly basis. China, this is in RMB one, which is RMB 10,000. I think this is uh, E. No, this is RMB E yuan. So this is E is what is an E? 100 million? Is that
Yi
is
is 100 million, yes.
yeah. So on a monthly basis, China has 45,396 E of RMB of consumption, and cars is 4,452. So 10%. 10% is cars. It's the largest item.
Right. I suspect that the consumptions, I mean, the purchase of car is not even in the consumption.
The what of cars? The
Yeah,
purchase of
yeah, purchase a car because so the consumption here, they do have a transport and communication expenditure, but I don't know if that include the purchase of car.
Yeah, I don't know. So
Okay.
maybe they have that in I. So I really don't know. But it should be in consumption. Uh, uh, in all other economies, buying a car is consumption.
So yeah, now you look at the transport, it's per capita is about 4,000 RMB a year. So every month just a few hundred. How could that amount be enough to buy the car that you talked about? You say it's 26,000 is RMB or
US
US dollar?
dollars. US
Yeah,
dollars.
US dollar. No, how could you? There's a
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah, well, one, that number isn't. Not everybody in China has can afford a car, right? China's car
Oh, okay.
penetration rate is still the minority. So, but still, that's what I mean. That those numbers are very much lowballed. The
Not,
the
well, it's not. Yeah, one is low ball, but they just don't match up with the retail sales.
correct,
They don't
correct.
match up with the retail sales. So,
Yeah,
but then, yeah, my point also is, I mean, I hear what you say, but it also could be the retail sales being overstated. But then, yeah, you have the breakdown. You said that from the breakdown, you found that they all can be reconciled. So
yeah,
you found the retail sales are very reliable. Then that part I need to dig around a little bit more. So
yeah,
I haven't
yeah,
done that part.
yeah,
But I look at the consumption per capita. So they look like a sensible number because 30,000 is talking about nationwide, right? So that
hmm
concerning is
hmm
600 million people.
yeah,
Um, and then in the tier one city, of course, where you are living in, say in Beijing, could be much higher, but there are many like second, third,
yeah,
fourth tier city.
yeah,
The consumption could be, so way lower than the 30K a year.
yeah.
'Cause people there can, yeah.
Yeah, I looked into those numbers, and when you just multiply those numbers by 1.4 billion people in China, and then you see how many cars are sold in China, and you put that number against that, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah. So, but how about the urban, just the anecdotal, right? People around you. So just take the Beijing, so that you're familiar with now.
okay,
Yeah, what are people, where people are so allocate their income every month?
there is a lot of whining and dining. There is a lot of going out in restaurants. They're all booked and packed, pretty full. Um, the cars that people are buying now are just very impressive. I did a spot check. I went back to Seattle over this past summer, and it's not just Seattle, but it's Redmond, Bellevue area of right outside Seattle. That is Microsoft center of the United States. It's one of the richest places in the U.S. And I look around at the cars in the parking lot, and they were, largely unimpressive. They were compacts, small SUVs, pickup trucks. On the streets of Beijing, like every other car is a luxury make or model. It's a Mercedes, BMW, Audi, or now a whole slew of domestic brands that are pushing into the luxury space. So it is totally unfair to compare Beijing with, Beijing is not representative of the rest of China, but I'm not comparing Beijing to the U.S. I'm comparing Beijing to Redmond, Washington, which is also one of the richest places in the U.S. And I find that um, on a lot of things, Beijing seems to be more upscale than Redmond, Washington.
Right. Could there be a chance, so to your point about consumption being understated in China, so could it be a chance that the purchaser car being counted into I, the investment item in China?
I mean, it could be, but that's more to my point, right? That just says that the way that the GDP
Mm.
is calculated is done wrong. If you switch the car over to the consumption side, the consumption would be not 38% of GDP, but push it up to 50. Or if they played a lot of games like that, where they put a lot of things into the I side, then
Yeah, okay. Makes sense.
yeah,
So then for yourself, so just for your own household, right, just on the percentage.
yeah,
I know that yeah, you have a kids attending college in Beijing.
Yeah.
So just think about, I know that now you are mostly the so-called passive income for a retired life.
Yeah.
So out of your income, what percentage that you actually spend and what percentage you put aside in saving?
Well, we don't really save because it's all coming out from savings. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but then your
So
savings still have a kind of you probably have an idea about you actually have certain amount inflow every month from so your interest, income, and all these things. So wouldn't it?
yeah, I don't think I did a breakdown of that, but
Mm,
let's just say that our portfolio is still going up, but it's
mm,
very much depending on the market. So, but we're not a good representation. We're not a
okay,
we're quite a
right, right.
lousy representation. So, no, it shouldn't go down this avenue. But
Yeah, because you mentioned about the average Beijing is spend mostly on the wine and dining.
uh,
Um,
I
but
suspect,
you don't have
yeah,
the kind of breakdown about where they put their money every month.
I suspect for a normal family that the breakdown is mortgage slash rent. But most families actually probably don't even have a mortgage because they
Mm,
outright own their homes. So maybe I hate to say most, but probably something about most. And then it will be the kids' education,
yeah,
and then their cars and normal expenditures. But education is
yeah.
probably top after housing, right? After they already bought their house.
Education, yeah, only if they attend the private school, right? So there's a
Oh, no,
lot of
no, no.
schools
What I
in
mean by
China.
education. So what I mean by education is uh, uh, um, even if you attend public schools, you have to give your kid all kinds of stuff, tutoring, even though they're trying to shut it down, after school
Mm,
activities, going, art classes on weekends, all kinds of stuff. It's all kid stuff. If you have a kid, that's just a money pit in urban China.
right, right.